Hey, it's Bob. Welcome back to my channel. So I wanted to give a reaction to Kathy Griffin's Laugh Your Head Off tour. She performed at the Arsht Center. Um, Probably should have remembered the date before I started filming this, but whatever. It was like a couple weeks ago. I think she said she had 6 dates left, so I don't kind of feel bad giving a couple spoilers because I did want to kind of give a reaction to some of the stuff that I found out at the show that she hasn't really talked about in the press and all that stuff. But yeah, so just a little background. I've liked, well, not obviously, I've liked Kathy Griffin for a really long time, from the D List. Even I feel like I used to see her on Rosie O'Donnell in the 90s when she was on Suddenly Susan. So I feel like she's always kind of been somebody that I've known and thought was hilarious. And then the Bravo show was really great. And then mainly her, I would say mainly her stand-up comedy on TV, so her TV specials, which she's in the Guinness Book of World Records for having the most. And that's really what I remember her by, I would say, probably more than anything else. And so I saw her live, I think, probably in the early 2000s. I'm not sure exactly which tour, because again, she's very much more of a storyteller if you haven't seen her live or haven't seen any of her shows in the past like 20 years. She does more storytelling and just tells hilarious stories. It's kind of off the cuff. She basically times herself, you know, to make sure she doesn't have to pay extra for being on stage any longer than like 3 hours. So we got like basically 3 hours of her stand-up comedy. Again, since she's been blacklisted over the past year, like I've really only seen her mainly on YouTube. She was on Bill Maher, she was on The View, I'm not sure where else. She had Jimmy Kimmel, I think. So I've kind of seen her a little bit. I've seen some of the jokes she said in the interviews she says on in the comedy, but it was definitely worth going. I would say the first thing I definitely want to get out is that I think it's a shame if this doesn't get either televised or turned into a DVD, because I think that of all the stand-up comedy tours she's ever done, this one was very much a combination of actual current events. Like it really hits the zeitgeist of what's going on right now, and she's really a part of it. She mentions that she's like one of the top 10 most searched people in 2017, which again is pretty crazy, just being a comedian, you know. And I think I don't know exactly what her age is. I think she said she's 57, which, I mean, she's very young at heart in terms of her comedy. Like it's still very kind of like naughty and young and fun, but she's still a 57-year-old woman, if I got her age correct. And that and so that's kind of really interesting. But yeah, so she kind of goes into obviously her interrogation by the Department of Justice and the Secret Service for the picture with the mask with the ketchup. And I mean, I'm somebody that it didn't necessarily make me think any differently of her. I feel like she's always kind of pushed the envelope, especially with those sorts of things. And by the way, she's always hated Trump. Like before he became president, like she would always call him a D-bag, and she like never liked him. And I think I want to say when she was like the roast master for Joan Rivers, that she was like always like yuck and all this stuff. Like she really had an issue with him. Obviously, we now know why. I think everybody's kind of, you know, one way or another kind of figured out why he may come off as kind of like really slimy and terrible to people. But yeah, I really just want to give mainly a reaction to the performance. So it was already a little bit ago, and so I don't remember the exact, you know, play-by-play. She basically goes between talking about Kim and Kanye West, who were her actual neighbors, I think in Bel Air, and they moved away or whatever. But so she kind of goes into like pop culture, kind of making fun of them and all that stuff, which is interesting because that's another part of the zeitgeist of you know, these times. And then she goes into the Trump stuff and who was there and who wasn't, and who was cool and who wasn't. And I would definitely say one of my favorite parts, and it kind of sounds like totally negative and terrible, but I was wondering what she had in store for Anderson Cooper and CNN, and she really does kind of give the tea with that whole situation. So, and briefly, just to review, she didn't even get paid for the first 2 times that she worked that New Year's Eve thing, which to me sounds crazy. Again, that's something I feel like would only happen to a woman. I'm pretty sure she said that. And then she said that on her like 8th year, she tried to negotiate a salary bump, and she obviously is the talent for that event. There was obviously, as we saw with Andy Cohen, they really needed somebody like Kathy to basically bring that show home and make it actually entertaining, because Anderson Cooper on his own really doesn't really do much, And so she asked for a raise and she got docked, like her pay, she got a pay cut from CNN. So it's like, wow, CNN, like probably not going to be watching your New Year's Eve. I didn't really watch last year. I tuned in for a few minutes, but it was so flat and boring that I was just like, oh my God, I can't. But yeah, so that was crazy about CNN. And then like the whole thing, like she says in the press and everything, and she's like, the Anderson Cooper calling her disgusting, literally like the day of the mass thing was awful. Of course, even if he wasn't like, a Vanderbilt and wasn't like, people in America that love him, it would still probably hurt having a friend jump on the pylon on like probably one of the worst days of your life. So that I already kind of had felt a certain way about Anderson Cooper, and that was kind of like, oh, okay, so I might have been right in my own ideas of who the type of person he is. And then she saved the best revenge for him though, because, and this is a spoiler, so I can't really get into it because it's really terrible, but she basically, she says she was hurt by it, and then she reads a letter from one of her fans who, I guess is a young gay guy, because it's hilarious the like way that it's written, but basically she had a fan like copy her in the letter that he sent to Anderson, dragging him like for filth. Like, you don't understand. It was so good. The basic gist of it was this gay guy was like, how could you turn on Kathy Griffin when she didn't turn on you when you were in the closet for such a long time? And again, that's a big gripe that the LGBT community has with people like Anderson Cooper, that they really benefited from being in the closet, and gave kind of that example to people like me, where it's like, okay, the right thing to do is to never mention your sexuality, and kind of basically benefit from the fact that bigots will just, look the other way and all that. So he basically goes into that and reads him for filth, and it was hilarious. And that was probably one of the highlights for me. She doesn't really go into Andy Cohen, aside from asking what his skill set was, and the audience was quiet because clearly that's not what he's known for, is, talent and all that. And it's true, like, to be fair, I love all of his shows and all that. I think he's really good in the executive's chair. But in terms of on-air talent, he doesn't have it. Like, it's very flat. It's very, he's like, So I kind of like that she really didn't even go into him that much, aside from saying he was a terrible boss and he has no talent, which I think, again, that was also a pretty fair criticism there. But yeah, and again, like, my whole thing with this comedy tour is that I really do think it's a shame if it isn't televised, or again, like, captured, because the story is so important. And if you've seen a lot of her specials and all that, they always change. So it's like, she's probably not going to give you this story in this package ever again. It does have like the crazy parts where it's like, I think it's the FBI that is like interviewing her under oath, again, about a mask of ketchup. Like, that to me is crazy. Oh, and then one of the things that she revealed that, again, super spoiler, she may hate me for revealing this, but whatever. Part of that show, she talks about how she had to have her attorney argue for 2 months because I don't know if it was the Department of Justice or the FBI or whatever, they wanted her to do a perp walk, aka go like downtown in LA and get in handcuffs to be questioned like at the police station. And I'm like, whoa, wait a minute. Like, she doesn't have to make it clear that she didn't actually do anything, you know what I mean, like, against the law. So I just think it's crazy, and I think that was her whole point, was kind of like to reveal the thing she calls it, the Trump wood chipper, that it's just like, you know, she's a private citizen, she's a comedian, like, she's, again, like a 57-year-old woman. She had, her sister was dying, and, like, all this crazy stuff, and yet she still had, like, you know, we were basically paying and subsidizing for, her to be harassed for, you know, basically like an off-color joke, realistically. I mean, like, the crazy thing I think about the Kathy Griffin, thing with, like, you know, I hate to say conservatives because there's a lot of conservatives that I really like, but I mean, it is the right wing that is against her. So, I mean, there's no other way to really put that. The thing that's weird to me is that it's like, we are a society that glorifies violence, even sexual violence, so much. Like, if you turn on television, if you play video games, you know, anything, like, violence is 100% glorified, and it's never necessarily even addressed in any way, shape, or form. And then yet you have a comedian that, you know, uses a violent image. Don't get me wrong. Like, I'm not saying that, like, I don't think Trump's son Barron was hurt by seeing that. He probably didn't see it. I mean, I don't, you know, I'm pretty sure, like, all he had to do was, like, FaceTime, you know, his dad to be like, okay, your head wasn't cut off. Like, I'm pretty sure that that was all BS, but again, like, just taking a violent image and then having, like, being on the Interpol list, like, really? And then another thing that I thought was crazy, again, not so much in terms of the comedy, was, I don't know the name of the photographer, but apparently the photographer that took the photo got a deal on Netflix. So that kind of, and I'm like a huge supporter of Netflix. I watch Netflix a lot. I'm a cable cutter, or cord cutter, whatever you call that. But it made me feel really funny that it's like, you know, and she wasn't necessarily saying anything in terms of like, oh, why can't Netflix give me a special? But she did make a point of saying that it's like she's untouchable in the US, while the photographer that took the photo, that still owns the rights, you know, got a deal. So it's kind of like makes you wonder also on both sides. It's like, you know, is this really all about money? Is this really all about, you know, being partisan and all that? Because it's just crazy how, you know, different people can be treated so differently for, in that case, the same image, right? Because just because she was in the image, she was essentially just a model in that photo. She doesn't even own the photo. So for her doing a modeling job, let's just say, you know, to simplify it, and then having the photographer that took the image, that is in charge of the image, he didn't have to take the image if he didn't stand by it, or release it for that matter, and yet he basically gets out unscathed. It's very like Justin Timberlake and Janet Jackson, where it's like, how does this make any sense? So it really puts into question the outrage over the photo in general, and it really brings the gender question into the forefront, where it's like, okay, and again, I don't know if she brought it up in depth, but you know, there is Snoop Dogg, and there are other people that have, you know, produced imagery that, you know, shows violent imagery about the president, and yet they didn't necessarily have anything happen to them. And I think that was kind of the vibe from the performance. Again, it was actually hilarious. So it's like, you know, she does the Maggie Griffin jokes, which we all love. It does get serious, but I wouldn't say it was so serious that it was like traumatizing. It was serious, but you wanted to know what all happened. So it was kind of also like, okay, yeah, like it is, some of the subject matter was grim, and she was obviously hurt by a lot of the stuff, and she showed emotion and all that, but it was mainly obviously funny. And I think the funny thing is that, like, you know, comedians really are on a quest for the truth, and I think that that's why, again, like, you know, to wrap this up, I really do think that it would be unjust if she doesn't at least get this either televised or, you know, have a special with this tour. You know, I love a bunch of different comedians, a bunch of them have deals, and I don't see why everybody can't hear this story unless you actually go to her stand-up. I know that she doesn't have that many left, so it's not a matter of selling tickets at this point. It's a matter of keeping it on the record. And I think that, yeah, I think it's a really important story. It's a really important American story. It's very timely. And if you do have a chance to go see her before she finishes, I don't know if she's done already, but I would definitely, definitely recommend it. It was very informative, and it really makes you see another side, particularly of, you know, this country and basically the people in charge, and how your identity and your politics can actually get you in trouble in and of themselves. And that to me is crazy. And, you know, seeing stuff happen now, like the Kavanaugh hearing, it only ingrains that even more, at least for me, where it's like the double standard. It's not even a double standard at this point. It's like a triple, quadruple standard, you know. And you know, male privilege is a real thing, and politics are dirty, more so than I even thought before. And so yeah, those were a lot of the lessons learned. But again, it was still really freaking funny. And it's still a good time. It was a good Saturday night, you know, having a cocktail with a friend. And really, Kathy, who, you know, I've grown up always kind of, you know, seeing her, understanding her point of view. And so already knowing her point of view and seeing it applied to this story, I thought was very powerful. So I think, if anything, I wanted to at least leave some sort of record, even though I don't know, I may get trolled for posting a Kathy Griffin video. I'm not entirely sure yet, but I got trolled anyway for other stuff, so whatever. Yeah, if you could still watch her, go watch her. If not, I feel like she needs to do like a viral campaign to get herself on some sort of like, you know, TV or something, or Netflix. Why not? I mean,